Hi and welcome to RCKicks. On today's show, well, we're going to be talking about going racing on a budget. Can you save a bit of money? The price of entry can get rather expensive. So in this episode, we're going to cover some of the aspects and some things that you can probably look at to try and lower that price to get a better bang for buck, and looking at some of the potential options available. Do you go for a ready-to-run team associated RB10, or do you look at second-hand offerings? Also, we're going to be talking about the buggy price life cycle, including the parts life cycle as well of the trends that we tend to see over the years when it comes to racing buggies. So if that interests you, stay tuned. Now, obviously, you can throw as much money at this as you like. What? It all makes sense? No, it doesn't. But not everybody is comfortable spending insane amounts of money to go racing, especially when you start out. So I'm going to give you some ideas of what I've just done now in the UK, and it kind of hopefully will open up some doors so you can kind of do your own research and find out. So the latest and greatest is what your racing company in your country is currently selling as their best kit that's available. Now in the UK we've got two currently. One that's very popular at the moment is the team associated B7. So this is the all singing all dancing kit from them. It's the best they can actually produce as a manufacturer. Well, yeah. So obviously there's a lot of time, money and effort that goes into this, so they've got to recoup some of that money. So when they bring this car out, it's basically listed at a price, and that is the most you're ever realistically going to pay for this car. We'll come on to upgrades in a bit later. So that is a very expensive way to go. Over time, that car becomes more sort of normalized, and it has a certain lifespan before it's succeeded by an evolution of this car or a whole different car, depending on its life cycle. Now the B7 is the latest in a new batch, so it will be a 7.1, 7.2 and so on and so forth. So what happens is that stays at a very high price. The second an announcement of an updated car is made available to the public, that has an instant impact on the price of the car. Now there is a little caveat to that. It depends on what's been released. If it's a whole new car, like going from a team associated B6.4 to a 7, it's a whole new family of car, so it's a bigger jump. There's a lot more changes. If it's just a small revision, like a 7 to a 7.1, it will have a smaller, as a lot of people will look at the difference between the current car and the new one coming. If it's only a few little parts that have been upgraded, then for them it's better to stick with the buggy they have and just buy the updates. Whereas if it's a big enough jump that you can't really do that, then they will buy the new car and sell the old one. So what happens is it gets discontinued, so a lot of companies that have got these in stock will list them as sale items. Also at the same time, flooding onto the market is all the second-hand versions of them. So as you can see, prices get driven down very fast, especially for race buggies. Then what happens is over time it starts to sort of level off as it goes down, it trickles down as newer versions come out, and then what happens is eventually it hits the bottom. As cheap as you're going to get a reasonable race buggy, it might be 7-8 years old. It also depends how good it was when it was out, if it was seen as a brilliant buggy for its time, if it's got a bit of a cult following, or if it was known as being a bit rubbish. That all affects the bottom, where it bottoms out at. Then over time it sits in purgatory, where basically nobody wants it. The new racers have moved on and on and on, and it's completely off their radar. The vintage collectors, it's way too new for them, so they're not interested either, and it basically sits bottomed out at nothing. Then eventually it starts to pick up very slowly as it becomes more collectible. And then it keeps going and going and going, and then there's an slow upward trend of the value increasing. So if you're looking to get into a used buggy at a cheaper price, you can use this trend to your advantage and you can save yourself a lot of money. Also, there's another aspect of that you've got to pay attention to, and that's parts availability. Now, parts availability usually when the car first comes out is usually quite low, and then it slowly comes out as they get the parts out for it. Aftermarket parts start appearing for it, and it gets to a peak. As it gets to a peak, that's usually when the car has been out for a while but it's still very current. And then when the latest version comes out, then those parts will start to decline. With the caveat that it depends on if the next version is very close and it only has a few small updates, some of those aftermarket parts or the parts from the previous generation can still be used on that car. But over time, the parts will slowly go down over the years, eventually bottoming out where there's no demand for the car, there's no demand for parts are just floating around, they've all been on sale. And then eventually, when that car starts to pick up for the collectors later on, many years later, aftermarket companies will start to make parts for it again. We see that now with the RC10s, lots of aftermarket parts now coming as it's being real vintage. So that's the overall sort of life cycle-ish. Take it with a pinch of salt, but you get the idea. So when we look at going second hand, we need to take all that into account, and I've actually got 3 cars in front of me that kind of reflect that. So the first one I've got here, which I've picked up secondhand, this is the current Schumacher LD3. Now currently this car, brand new, retails for £349. Now I picked this up secondhand used, but still current, for £250. So basically I've saved £100 off and it's been built for me. Now, if you're lucky and you're looking around and you've got a little bit more budget, you can go, well, I'll buy a current car secondhand. And if you look around, some key things to look for. Hi, welcome to RCKicks raffles. In this raffle, you have the opportunity to win one of these. And I'm not talking about these, I'm talking about these. Yep, a lot of people have been asking me, could I do a raffle that involves a brand new kit that I don't build? So that's what this raffle is. So if you win this raffle, you have the opportunity to choose one of these 2 beautiful Kyosho 60th anniversary kits. You've got the Optima Mid 60th or the Ultima JJ, and I will buy one and ship it to you so that you can build it yourself. So what are you waiting for? Get your ticket below for the price of a coffee. Some key things to look for is, can you get a car that's got upgrades in it? Because those upgrades cost quite a bit of money and they're already in the car and the value doesn't really go up massively. The car becomes more desirable, but the price doesn't really change a lot. So you can save yourself even more money by finding a used example with a few upgrades thrown in, because those upgrades cost money. So you've got yourself a £100 saving on the car. Also, you might end up saving another £50, £100 in parts that you've got, or upgrade parts. Also, another little tip when you're looking to go second hand, sometimes when racers jump out of one car into another, they have a load of parts because they keep them in their parts bin when they go racing in case they break it. You can pick up those parts as well as a job lot, and that's where they become real good value, because you're getting a used car that's probably been maintained reasonably well. You're getting extra parts thrown in as well, and you're getting upgrades thrown in again, and you're getting a good discount. So that can really give you a good return on your money. Then if your budget is even more limited, you can go slightly older. So this I picked up here, this is an LD. Now I managed to pick up basically 2 of these from one person, so I've got tons of parts. And I paid £150, including this body came with it, but it did need more work. I had to basically strip it down, give it a good clean, order a few little bits and pieces for it as well to put it all together, and strip down the other car that I got so that I had all my parts, so I knew what I had. Also, I had to buy extra wheels and tyres for it as it didn't come with that. Now, the difference between these 2 buggies, on a beginner or even a club racer, you're not going to get the best out of these. Your driving skill is not going to max out these 2 cars. This was much cheaper for me to get into than this was, but obviously it's slightly older. But from a parts point of view, parts for this are still readily available. So this is the sweet spot of low budget, big return. Loads of, for £150, I got basically 2 of them, loads of extra parts. Parts are still available, really, really cheap. But if you let it go too far, like I've got here, this is a Schumacher SV2. Now this is kind of at the point where parts are just starting to become really difficult to get hold of, and it's really at the bottom. It's a lot older. Performance wise, it's still good, but if you're going to look at that sweet spot, you probably wouldn't go this old. Now, it varies depending on the cars that you're looking for from the manufacturer, but that's to give you the idea of the scope. Now, this is starting to become a little bit more collectible. It's just starting out, and I've restored this one, but I did find some things that were quite difficult, like to find the correct wheels, but a lot of the parts are still kind of available. Now, that gives you the car that you're going to go with, but you've also got to look at your electronics. What electronics do you put in these? Now, there's 2 lines of thought that you can go with this one. One is you just buy the cheapest you can to get you going. 2 is you invest a bit more money in your electronics, because later on, eventually you'll decide to upgrade your buggy to another buggy. If you get more and more into it, the electronics can come with you. So the electronics, putting a bit more money into the electronics, once you've decided that this is for you, can be moved along, so you can really justify the cost. I do this all the time in my own buggies. I have quite expensive electronics, but I'm really happy with them, so I just move them from one car to another. As with the electronics, there's a million different ways to go depending on your budget and your needs. So I went through and I picked out what I thought was a reasonably good price for a second-hand race buggy that you're getting into, but you've got a little bit more budget, but you're not right at the bottom. The first thing was this from Hobbywing. Now, this is a 10BL120 censored ESC. Now, the reason I went for this was for a few different reasons, and the first one was the price point, which I managed to pick this up for £59.49. Now, that might sound a little bit expensive, but let me explain. It has a few things going for it. Now, the first thing is 120 amps, which means it's pretty powerful. So you can run on 2S down to a 4.5 turn, which is way overkill for a 1/10 racing buggy. So there's no limit on the power that you can run in your car as you progress. The next thing is 2S and 3S. Now, when you're racing a 1/10 buggy, you don't need 3S, it's 2S. But what happens later on down the line if it's not for you and you decide to sell things on? Well, the ESC being 2S and 3S, you can throw this into so many different RCs. So you haven't really lost your money. So that I really liked, because you could put it in you could upgrade a Slash with it, you can put it in any 1/10 and it will happily do what you want to. Also censored and non-censored, so again, very flexible, very easy to use. So I think this was worth the investment. Also, the other side of it is it runs a BSC at 7.4 volts, so it's going to get the most out of your servos in your race buggies as well. So that's why I decided that this was a good way to go. There is a alternative, which is this, which is an XR10. Now, the reason I didn't go with this over this one was just the potential to use it in different things. This is more dedicated to go into a race buggy. So depending on how serious you are, or whether you're definitely going to stick with racing 1/10, you might want to go this route. But I like the flexibility of this, because this is not 3S. Next, we have the servo, and there is hundreds and hundreds of servos. So I picked one that I thought was at a reasonable price point for a good return that would go into a buggy of this stature. And that's this, the KST. I'll put up the specs here. This is a CM653 low profile servo, 18 kg. It was £25.91 and it has a response of 0.09 seconds at 7.4 volts. So we'll play happily at 7.4 volts with the BSC with the ESC. Now, the reason I went with those is they sent me a few of these about 2 years ago, and I still use them today, and they're really good, and I haven't had any issues with them. KST normally do servos more for helicopters, and that's kind of what they're known for. So precision-wise and quality, you're kind of getting there at a balance of £25.91. Now, I did pick up another servo that I've never had before, and the name, so it's a Yippin servo, which doesn't sound that great, does it? But it's a 25 kg servo, and it does 0.07 at 7.4 volts. So they're saying from a performance point of view that this is faster than the KST. Now, the reviews on this look really good, and also this is a full metal servo, whereas the KST was a plastic housing. But I've never tested this, so I'm going to see how this gets on. And I bought this for the LD because it's a cheaper price point. So it has the potential to be really good, and the reviews are really good, but honestly, I've never run it, so I can't say. But this is what I'd be looking at if my budget was much more limited. But there is loads of servos around. One thing that I definitely always go for is I tend to use low profile servos. And the reason is because if you take it out, this will go in any buggy or any RC. Whereas some buggies, you have to have a low profile servo. So if you go for a full height servo, you might find it won't go in everything. So I just tend to stick to the low profiles, as I know they'll just fit in everything, because obviously I'm chopping and changing electronics in loads of different cars, but it gives you that extra flexibility. So I'm looking forward to finding out, is this any good? One other thing with this that I liked is it came with extra gears. So if you do end up stripping the gears on this, you can take it to pits, swap the gears that are damaged over, and you can go again. So for that price point, I thought it was worth a try. Now, as for a transmitter receiver combo, my favorite and my go-to is the Noble NB4. Now, they're a little bit more expensive, and I looked for a second-hand one, and currently you can get them for £105 to £125. I would highly recommend going to that, because that will do everything you need it to do, crazy fast. The receivers are really cheap, and they're upgrading them all the time, and there's a new receiver that's come out, so you can upgrade it even though you've got the older transmitter. They're still supported with new firmware. I love mine, and I'd highly recommend it. So you're looking at 105 to 125. Obviously, you can go cheaper than that. You can go to like a Radio Link where you're paying 50 to 60. But if you've got the budget, I would recommend stretching that little bit further, especially if you're going to go with something like an LD3, which is the latest and greatest RC. So that's kind of the middle budget aspect of it. Now, as for the motor, I decided to go with a Just Stock Hobbywing 10.5 turn, censored obviously. Now that was £62. Now you can get combos together to save a little bit of money. Like I've seen, you can get a combo where you get the Hobbywing XR10 with the 10.5 Just Stock motor for 112, I think it is, or you can buy them separately. So that's what I went with in this, and 10.5 turns is plenty, especially when you're starting off. So I think from a price point, I think that's a really good way to go. Now, as you can see, my cables are really long. Now, when you get more into it and you settle down on your buggy, you can cut all your wires down to make it look super neat. I don't tend to bother with that because I take out the ESC and I might put it in something else. So if you cut it down to be perfect for this buggy, then you end up wanting to put it in something else later on. You kind of gonna have to rewire it to get it to work, and that could be a real faff. So don't worry about making it look super neat and tidy. As long as the body clears it okay, definitely worth it. One other thing, that a tip is, if you buy your ESC, some stores will actually do the soldering for you, and you just pay a little bit extra, which is what I did on this one, and I highly recommend it. Saves you having to do any soldering. So you can pick your bullets, connectors. You get the choice of, is it 5mm and 4mm? 5mm seems to be the more popular. I tend to run 4mm, but I have got some 5mm, but yeah, personal choice on that one. Now, there's a few things that you're going to have to buy, wheels and tyres. Now, depending on what you go with and where you run, you're going to buy different tyres to suit the track that you're running on. So I haven't really set that price on top of this, because even if you buy a ready-to-run racing buggy, you're going to have to buy the tyres and wheels to match the track that you're running on. Whatever the car comes with is probably not going to be optimal for going racing at your local track. But to give you an idea of price, there's two ways you can go. You can get them pre-mounted for you, you pay a little bit more for that, or you can buy the tyres, the inserts and the rims and then glue them up with yourself. If you can't be bothered with the faff at the beginning, you're probably looking at around £16 for the front set and £17 for the rear, give or take, depends where you get them from. Personally, at the beginning, I think it's probably worth you just buy them pre-done, just because you're putting a lot of effort into getting it all together working. Why make your life a little bit difficult? Then later on, when things are settling down on your next set of tyres, maybe then go for buying them individually and then do them yourself. Now, another one is your battery and your charger. If you're going to be buying something like this, these are all shorty lipos. There is hundreds of different versions available. You want a high C rating, but I haven't added that cost into this buggy, because if you bought the ready to run, the classic one that we're kind of looking up against is the team associated RB10. You would have to buy the charger and you'd have to buy shorty lipo batteries for that anyway, because the buggy that you get is going to have a USB charger and it's not going to have the right batteries to go racing with, and you're probably going to need 2 or 3. But price wise, definitely want to shop around. As for your battery charger, you don't need anything fancy whatsoever. There's so many options and you can pick them up for like £20 to £30 all the way up to £100, but I've covered those in many different videos. So all in all, what's it going to cost me to run the latest Schumacher racing buggy that's, you know, right up there at the top and can easily grow with you? You won't need to upgrade this buggy at all. So what did it actually cost me? Well, you're looking at £496, so £500. Now, if you add in the battery and the charger, you're going to be more looking at £550. So for £550, you're driving the latest buggy. You've got a quality Hobbywing ESC and motor. You've got a beautiful transmitter, which is the Noble NB4. So that is really high quality stuff. You haven't skimped really, but you've got into it for £500. So all in all, from a price point, I think that's really good value. But obviously, if you don't have £550, you can go the other route like I did with the lay down and then maybe go a little bit cheaper on your servo. The main difference in price obviously was this buggy is like £120 more than what I paid for the lay down, and this didn't come with parts, whereas the older car did. So you can take another 100 off that, so you're really looking at £450. So you can get quite a lot for your money. Another side of it is you look at your resale value. Well, being that you bought this second hand, if you sold it, you're going to pretty much get back what you put into it. So if you look at the resale value of an RB10, for instance, they sell for £116. So you're going to lose money buying a brand new in box ready to run versus selling it on. You're going to lose another £100. So when you look at it like that, it actually starts to make more sense to go down the route of going second hand. Now, I could have saved even more money by buying second hand ESCs and second hand servos as well, so you could bring it down a little bit more. But hopefully that kind of shows you that there is some real options available of where you can go to buy second hand that will actually give you way more bang for buck down the line as you grow. Also, if you decide you don't really like it, you can save some of the electronics for another RC, sell on your car and get most of your money back. Now, the proof is in the pudding, and the whole reason I bought this car is my son has been racing with me once or twice and he's kind of slowly getting into it, so I thought I would building this. So let's see how he gets on as a new person getting into RC racing with a pretty decent setup.